2017 New Mexico Main Street webinar series. My name is Anna Bly. I am the Communications and Media Specialist here with New Mexico Main Street, and leading our presentation today is Revitalization Specialist Eduardo Martinez.
Thank you and welcome everybody. It's good to be here today. I have quite a busy webinar schedule today, so I'll jump right to it. We only have 20 slides in this presentation, but they have quite a bit of information. So I'm going to move quickly, and that way we'll have time at the end of the presentation for questions and answers. That is me actually doing organizational development work with one of our Frontier Community partners, Catherine D. Maria, in Magdalena last year. Just so you give you an idea who's on the other end of the line. Some of the topics I'm going to cover today at the start of the session: what does a proficient board of directors look like? What are the roles and responsibilities? I won't spend a whole lot of time on that one, but then I'll move on to recruiting and onboarding new board members, having effective meetings, the roles of the leaders, the organizational leaders, including the board chair and the executive director. And then I'll close out with some discussion about how to address conflict in your organization. We'll have time for question and answers at the end of the session as well. Right? A little bit about the proficient board. The proficient board is comprised of board members that are knowledgeable of their roles and the responsibilities. They're engaged in the work of the organization. They're ready to commit resources, not just their time and skills, but also financial resources to the best of their ability. They're willing to be an ambassador for the organization in the community and with others. They're attentive. Good board members are attentive to the issues at hand, also with an eye to the future. Where do we need to go next as an organization? And then ready to serve the organization with integrity. Some of the basics, as most of you already know, the tax-exempt nonprofit organization is a public trust that is governed by a board of directors. By IRS law, you must have at least 3 board members for a nonprofit, and most of our organizations our bylaws are set up for 7 to 13 board members. A few of our smaller communities have put that lower range, set that lower range of board members to 5 to accommodate the small size of the community, right? The board oversees the operations of the organization, the finances, and by law they are responsible for the standard of care, the duty of care, the duty of loyalty, the duty to manage accounts, and the duty of compliance. There's a handout that goes along with this presentation and that Anna will send out as part of the recording piece, and it really covers a little bit more in depth those 4 duties and what's expected of board members. So I won't spend a whole lot of time on that one today, but I did want to let you know that there's some information available to you. A little bit about the motivated board members. Well, nobody ever said, I joined this board because I really enjoy attending meetings, right? And so, you know, I saw this graphic in Albuquerque, city of Albuquerque one time. I thought it was pretty much on point about how some people feel about meetings, right? And so let's talk about what interests individuals in being part of a board, right? So first of all, people come to serve on a board for a number of reasons. There's a lot of research on this topic, and some of the key things that have come up: why people join a board, right? They want to give back to the community. They want to make a difference, right? They're committed or at least interested in the mission of the organization, whether that be human rights or animal services or Main Street work, right? A lot of people join a board for the networking opportunities, and particularly related to professional development. We do see in Main Street communities some individuals that join the board as their entry into public service. And so, you know, there's some pros and cons around that one, but we have a number of city councilors, mayors that really got their start in board development, board engagement through a Main Street program. Some new members want to improve their leadership skills, but more often than not, you'll see people join a board because they were asked, right? And this is a very common theme. I joined this board because I was asked, and the existing board really did a good job of relaying their mission with my skills and how I could support that work. Let's talk a little bit about why board members stay with an organization. So this is really about actualizing the work, right? So that they see, a board member sees, I am making a difference here and I'm able to move the work forward, right? I have loyalty and respect for the organization that was really arose out of that difference we were making in the community. So therefore I have a sense of duty and commitment to the organization. I have the opportunity to share my skills and my expertise, and I'm actually helping the constituent group or the issues that this organization is focusing, right? So I have an opportunity to contribute to the organization's success. And I want to take a moment to thank all those board members, not only who have joined MainStreet organizations, but continue to serve. A little bit about board types. There's a lot of different adjectives that have been used to describe boards, and so these startup board, usually that initial team that helps launch the organization. You have an operating board, and that's an adjective that's used to describe the board really running the operations of the organization. So you'll see this quite a bit in new organizations that don't have staff or have new staff that aren't fully versed in their work yet, right? And ready to pick it up and moving forward, right? Some boards are referred to as governance and policy making boards, and others are fundraising boards. More often than not, we look at MainStreet and Arts and Cultural District communities as working boards, and you'll see that play out in sort of our reviews, our annual reviews, and our expectations of what a board does in a community. In few cases, you'll hear the word, this is a restructuring board, and that's usually a team that comes together to reset the mission, to help revive an organization that has gone dormant for a couple of years. And so I won't go too deeply into the restructuring board. Right? Let's talk about recruiting board members, and I like to use the quote, you never have to recover from a good start. And so this not only applies to new organizations, but it applies to your organization every day, right? Where do MainStreet and Arts and Cultural District communities get their volunteers? Well, traditionally boards are made up, there's a bigger component of business and property owners from the district, civic leaders that are already in the community that are working on change and would like to continue that change in the downtown districts, right? Professionals, whether those might include lawyers, realtors, accountants, pretty much any skill. We see quite a few retirees and students as well that are now starting to engage in board processes, right? So basically, anybody who's willing to support your mission has an opportunity to be a good board member. So if you go looking for volunteers, you're going to find them. You want to do a good job of connecting your mission with their interests as well, right? I won't spend a whole lot of time on the foundational board of directors because that's usually has quite a few different issues that you'll have to deal with in an organization with a founding board of directors. So most of my content today is geared towards mature or maturing organizations those that have been around for a year or longer, right? Recruiting board members, there's a couple of ways to look at this. You can recruit for a specific representation. We want our downtown business owners to be on our board, or our property owners to be on the board, right? Specific skill sets. We're looking for a lawyer. We're looking for an accountant to serve as our treasurer. We're looking for somebody who can help us with event planning, right? Somebody who can guide us on some of our design issues, right? Or you can look at specific demographics, and we want to focus on the downtown community and adjacent residents. We want to add board members who are youthful and bring new energy to the organization. We want to diverse board by way of ages and ethnic backgrounds, right? And so how do you find those board members? I think what you want to do is you want to create an organization that's diverse enough that really represents the community, the district you serve, and brings a variety of skills and talents to the organization, right? It's no small feat to ask somebody to be on a board. It's usually at least a year and often a multi-year commitment. And so your recruitment of volunteers is important, right? Most often what we see in communities is a very direct recruitment process. That means an individual, a board member, or even an executive director reaching out and asking somebody to serve on the board, right? There is some opportunities to advertise, right, online on your websites. We're looking for board members. We're looking for a volunteer that can support our oversee our financial management. And those are often good spaces. They have a limited reach, right? So they don't reach everybody online. There are a number of community online bulletin boards that you can announce these as well, and so you can use those as well as social media and other media as well. I have seen some of our boards advertise in the local newspaper. We're looking for board members as well. You should use any and all of your public activities or public events as an opportunity not only for ambassadorship, but to reach out to people who might be good board members in the future, right? And then some of your projects, if you're looking at, say, a facade squad project or a trail project, any one of your projects that you're implementing under the 4 points, you're going to have an opportunity to meet people in the community. So there's an opportunity as well to share the message about your organization and maybe recruit some board members there. Once you find prospective board members, there are a number of things you might want to consider by way of an onboarding process, right? Maybe think about connecting a potential future board member to a project as a project volunteer. This gives them an opportunity to get a sense of what they're doing in the community, and it also gives them a sense of accomplishment. Oh, I contributed to this project, right? You might invite them, for those of you who are using committees, you might invite them to spend some time on a committee working on a project and or become a task force member on a specific project, right? It isn't a bad idea to invite prospective board members to one of your board meetings. They get a feel for the organization, its work. They get a feel for how it operates in the boardroom, what that looks like, right? So I worked on a number of boards where we invited board members in advance. They came back often with quite a few questions that we were able to respond to, and it actually helped build a stronger sense of understanding of what your mission is and how you go about it, right? Once you've extended the invitation to a board meeting, we hope you have an application process. It kind of formalizes from a potential volunteer to the board. Yes, I want to be on the board. These are the skills I bring. If you don't have an application process, I suggest you can create one very easily. I have some templates you can use. Please reach out to us and let us know if you want to look at different types of board member applications. Board usually votes to bring a board member on board. At that point, there's an orientation process. More often than not, the orientation can include the new board member and the executive committee, the new board member and the board chair, or the new board member and the board chair and the executive director, which is my recommendation. I think keep it small, keep the orientation small and short. And then as part of the onboarding process, make sure that you give that individual a term slot, right? So most of you who are bringing on board members, you have 2 or 3 year terms, and then you'll have to figure out when is their start date and their end date in their term, so that it facilitates really clear understanding about the timing and the beginning and the renewal of board terms as well, right? If you have any digital subscriptions or other membership pieces that you want to connect your new board member to, so if you have a Google group, for example, that used to share information within your board, You would want to bring them into that Google group. A couple of your board members, you might want to show them the MainStreet digital dashboard so that they can see where all of your important documents are stored as well, right? During the onboarding process, you want to understand the skills, the motivation, and the fit of any potential board member with your organization, and then make sure you're connecting their skills and their desires to what you need as well, right? Consider how you'll engage those of different ages, different genders, different ethnic or cultural backgrounds. And then I think this is an important piece. There's some very specific generational differences in how people communicate these days, and so you want to think about those as well during the onboarding process. It's not a bad idea to just ask somebody what type of communication resonates most with you. Is that, are you able to process text messages? Do you rather have direct communication? Do you want to see emails? So it's a good piece to talk about it on the front end, how you communicate with each other. During the initial orientation, as I mentioned earlier, I recommend the meeting with the board chair and the executive director. I think you should present some type of, in the orientation process, an overview of your handbook and what you're doing. And so I'll get into that one here in just a minute. There are actually two types of process. One is a physical board member handbook and one is a virtual one. I'll cover that here shortly. The orientation should cover the details of the organization, give some feedback on the history of the organization, and maybe your meeting culture, right? What are the expectations in the meetings? And then move to introducing them to the rest of the board at the board meeting, at their initial board meeting. When you do that, I think it's a good opportunity to let them introduce themselves, express why they're interested in serving on the board, and what they'd like to focus on, right? So make that initial introduction a little bit of a get-to-know-you piece with all your board members. I talked about the handbook in my last slide. So it's a great practice to have a board binder, a board handbook that includes different tabs that cover different pieces of your work, right? Should include on the front end at least your vision and mission statements, right? You can include your articles of incorporation. Most of those are found in your MainStreet dashboard. I'm not as concerned about your articles of incorporation as I am that you include your bylaws in your board member handbook. These are the guidelines that all board members need to be aware of and attentive to during your board meetings and your board operations, right? Should have some board roster and hopefully with some short bios for each of the board members in the board member handbook, right? You should have at least 6 months, and I recommend the previous 12 months of your board meeting minutes in the handbook. You should have in the handbook as well a listing of not only of your current projects but your current commitments. It's important for a new board member to understand, oh, we have committed A, B, and C in our partnership with the city. We have committed these things in our partnerships with New Mexico MainStreet, right? There should be a section on your policies so that your board members understand all the policies that the organization has adopted. And then any of your current plans, your MRA plans, your master plans, your cultural plans, and more recently your economic transformation strategies and your work plans. This should be reviewed and walked through during the orientation section, right? I want to introduce ideas I don't see very much in our MainStreet communities, but I have seen a couple of nonprofits use this extremely well, right? Use our digital resources to do the walkthrough on the orientation piece. Use your website to talk about here's our vision, here's our mission. If you have your projects listed on your website, you can go to that piece. And just that way you save money. The digital process allows you to save money on not having to print a lot of information, but you can walk through the orientation piece. Now, this only works if your websites are well done and up to date. I have used, for those orientations when you want to see, here's the impact of what happened recently from our project. You can direct them to your Facebook pages or your Twitter accounts, and you can walk through some of those pieces, and they'll get a chance to see what has been happening in the organization recently. The last one, the secure folders. I really love this idea when I first saw it. If you have a webmaster and or somebody who works with websites well, is to create a secure folder for your organization, just for your board members, right? So somebody might just type in www.nobhillmainstreet.org/board, and it would come up with a login and a password there. You can put all your minutes on there, you can put your bylaws on there, you can put your plans on there. They're stored in an online space, and so that even from one meeting to the next, a board member knows they can go to this secure page, they can see the minutes from the previous meeting. It really cuts down on the paper in the process, right? So we are more often than not moving to a very digital, very technologically oriented society, and so the use of secure folders to store all your board information, I think, works really, really well, as long as that landing page is designed and organized well, so that people can get to the content they need, whether it's the policies, the minutes, the bylaws, updates on the projects as well. If you do go to a secure folder space for all of your your board documents, I do recommend that you back those up regularly. We have seen problems with web hosting. You want to avoid any problems with a web host or even a webmaster that went out of business or disappeared, and you losing your information. So make sure you have a backup if you go to the online piece. Let's talk a little bit about effective meetings, right? So it's important in your meetings to put planning, dialogue, and work in the appropriate spaces, right? Are you allocating, first of all, enough time in your board meetings for the work you need to accomplish? If your board meetings are meeting every other month for 1 hour, it's going to be very hard to get a lot of work done in a 1-hour session. So you have an opportunity to do some reviews and some quick decisions, and then you're out. So generally speaking, most Main Street organizations meet monthly for 2 hours. You should be consistent in your meeting time and your meeting location. Now, I think as you get new board members, there's always that question about what's the best time to meet to accommodate everybody's needs. I don't think you're going to have an opportunity to meet everybody's needs all the time. And so I think the best thing to do is pick a specific date and be consistent with your meeting time. Sometimes it takes a couple of months for all the board members or new board members to align their calendars with that. But if we know it's the second Wednesday from noon to 2 p.m., I think I can start looking out a couple of months to start to set that time. Consistency is important. You can make minor adjustments along the way, but those should be the exception and not the rule, the changing board meetings, right? It's important to make sure that your board members are prepared for the presentations, right, in advance. Your discussion leaders are prepared. So there should be brief written reports submitted in advance so that everybody can come into the meeting having reviewed the documents and ready to move with the board work, right? Make sure that you're attending to sort of the human needs that everybody needs. If you're meeting late at night, you're going to start your board meetings when everybody is probably tired and had longer days, right? If you're meeting over lunch and they're extended meetings, you know, people are going to, some of your board members are going to be hungry, right? Board members have families to attend to in the evening, so I think it's important that you set up your board meetings to attend to the human needs as well, right? Effective meetings, I can't tell you how many times I've heard board members tell me that the reason for their exiting the organization is because they spend way too much talking and not enough action, right? So effective means focus on action, not just a dialogue, right? You can structure your agendas in a number of different ways, and Historically, a lot of nonprofits use the old business, new business sort of categories. Here's the old business we need to close out or finish closing out, and here's new business. I'm not a big fan of your structuring your agendas under those two categories because it just seems to focus on not so innovative on your work, right? You can focus your agendas on, to include task force and committee and even updates from your directors. You should partition your action items from your updates, right? So if people are having a little bit of challenge on getting to the meeting right at the start time, then maybe put your action items all together at the end of the board meeting, right? Or vice versa. People need to, you know, if you have problems with people staying for the long part of it, get your action items out of the way and then move to the updates. You should be reviewing your financials, hopefully monthly, no less than quarterly. But I think monthly is a good piece. It gives the board the opportunity to get a sense of where they are in their financial picture, right? Get some updates on how you're proceeding, what's the progress on your projects. If you need, spend some time troubleshooting problems, right? But I think you need to be very careful about how you structure your agendas so that it's not the entire board meeting devoted to just dealing with problems as well, right? Over time, twice a year, at least once a year, the annual meeting where you have elections, you should include some additional topics about what are the roles of the board members, who do we need to recruit, are we meeting our staffing needs, is it our staffing basically commensurate with our work, do we have enough resources, how do we evaluate ourselves as a board, an organization, and then what is our succession planning work? What do our terms look like? Who's going to be terming out in the next 6 months or the next 12 months, and what do we need to start planning for there as well, right? As you document your minutes, and I'll talk a little bit about the executive director role, but as you document your minutes, you shouldn't spend a whole lot of time documenting everything that happens in the board meeting or everything that's said. Critical information, critical decisions, and critical actions, and those actions usually are the actions between the current board meeting and the next board meeting, right? So that you can revisit those at the next board meeting. So be very succinct with your meeting minutes because you'll wear everybody out when you're asking them to review those and comment those and adopt them and approve them at the next board. A little bit about the board leaders. I'm going to start with the board chair. The board president, the board chair, sets the tone for everything in the organization, right? You have really active, really engaged board chairs. Things move at a different pace and with a different output and outcome than a very passive board chair, right? The role of the board chair really lead the organization, lead the board, and you focus on your success and outcomes, right? The board chair usually has to connect to resources, not only their resources, but they may be the ones that are having the conversations more often than not with your city managers, your city councilors, your political leaders as well, right? The board chair has to organize and manage the board and the board operations. And a board chair who doesn't do that well, I think you can see the results of that fairly quickly, right? The board chair oversees the executive director, right? The executive director cannot respond to 5, 7, 9, 11, 13 bosses, right? So board chair's role really oversees the executive director. Often the executive committee will be involved in the evaluation process, but usually the board chair is the direct contact with the executive director, except on project-specific issues, right? The board chair sets the agenda for the board meetings and should do that in partnership with the executive director. The executive director should say, these are the things of what we're dealing with right now we need to address. The committee members should make a request that they have something to bring to the board to include an item on the agenda. But it really is the board chair's role to set the agenda and identify, here's what we need to prioritize, what we need to cover in this board meeting versus others, right? During the board meeting, the board chair makes sure that there's attention to process, there's attention to order, there's attention to outcomes, right? So the board chair really has to decide, do we need to spend more time in dialogue or troubleshooting an issue, or can we move to our action items, right? The board chair must be attentive to, over the long term, succession planning and especially leadership development among all the members of the board. An individual cannot serve as a chair for an unlimited amount of time. So board chair should be part of that process. The board chair should take the lead in recognizing, acknowledging, and thanking the volunteers, particularly those that sit in the boardroom alongside him or her, right? The culture of the organization is really set by the board chair, the board president. So are you going to have a culture of performance, a culture of debate, a culture of inactivity? Really, the board chair establishes the culture of the organization by how they move the work in the boardroom as well. Role of the executive director. The executive director has an important role in engaging and supporting the board. It's important to remember they are not the staff for every board member in the room, and they should not serve as the secretary for the board itself, right? So they're not the administrative assistant. They have greater roles, right? We see executive directors who provide assistance on developing and writing up the meeting minutes, but that's a high-functioning board, the secretary of the organization, really understands their roles and responsibilities and steps into those spaces as well, right? The executive director should help you recruit board members when they see somebody in the community that is interested in your organization and wants to do the work. They should help you track the term limits for your officers and the board members. The executive director should be, if you don't have an accountant that's doing that for you, should be preparing the financial and other reports. And it's going to be important for the executive director to be able to respond to what's going on with the finances, because they know where, for the most part, where the day-to-day expenses and revenues are, right? They can assist with preparing the meeting materials and logistics, and then remember that your executive directors are the primary coordinators and liaisons between your board and New Mexico Main Street, your local government partners, any other partners in the space, right? Little bit, just to close out our presentation, the slides on board conflict. Had some great summaries from the nonprofit leadership program at Dalhousie University. Talks about board conflict. So there were basically 3 areas. One is the passive board. The passive board is really just going through the motions. There's a lot of complacency on the board. Most of the work done in an organization with a passive board is done by the staff and the executive director, right? You have potential for having embattled boards. I have seen this on a number of occasions, not just in MainStreet, but in my work with nonprofits over the last 15 years, right? The embattled board often is responding to outside pressures and outside forces, right? And we see that often in MainStreet and Arts and Cultural District programs. Your city leaders, your elected leaders, your city administrators have priorities that they like to see. And so the embattled board is often pressured by outside forces. Sometimes you'll see this play out by way of power plays, right? Individuals who are aligning into factions or alliances, and that often paralyzes the board into inaction. So the end result is pretty much the same as the passive board. It's not a whole lot of action. The study actually termed the third one the harmonious board. I actually prefer the term the synchronized board, so that synchronized board is respectful. There's blending voice and activity in your process and actions. They take ownership of the risk and the challenges, and then accountable for the results of the organization. Right? Board conflict usually comes from a number of sources, right? So first of all, you can have conflict among board members. Sometimes this is just personal, interpersonal differences in communication styles, right, leads to conflict. sometimes board members have conflict with the staff, right? Usually the executive director, and I think this is an area where the board chair has to take control of the situation. Often when you have multiple staff, multiple employees in an organization, or multiple volunteers like committee chairs, board members will get drawn into some of the conflicts between staff, right? And I think it's a very dangerous area for board members to really get drawn into those pieces. But that will get amplified, those conflicts, when a board member brings them into the boardroom. And sometimes you'll see conflict between your organization and your constituents, right? And especially in a MainStreet organization or an arts or cultural district where the organization wants to move in a certain direction and residents or business owners or property owners have some concerns about that direction, right? So you want to recognize what are the sources of your conflict and how they're playing out. The important thing about managing the conflict is to make sure they clarify the roles and the responsibilities, set and maintain healthy boundaries and practices to deal with conflict, right? As a board, you should establish a code of conduct and a culture around appropriate conduct. One of the boards recently, as I work with in MainStreet, recently adopted a code of ethics as well, and it sets up very healthy boundaries, right? Make sure you understand the underlying sources of your conflict so you know how to deal with those. Don't be afraid to address, or don't be afraid of all conflict, right? So sometimes conflict can help you address issues that have been residing or festering for a while, and so healthy conflict it really helps you move to another space, right, and become a higher functioning organization. Somebody once described to me dysfunction is dealing with the same old conflict every day, and function is dealing with a brand new challenge every day, right? So address the conflict openly and directly. Make sure you're clear and do not attack each other in the addressing of the conflicts, right? Seek collaborative solutions to conflict wherever possible. It really preserves the integrity of the organization and everybody's interested in serving. It's important for the board chair to address conflict when no one else is ready to, right? So if the board chair is contributing to the conflict, maybe he can ask the vice president or the vice chair to facilitate the conversation, but ideally your board chair is an exemplar of facilitative leadership and helps move past the conflict. And then where there are important resolutions to dealing with a conflict, it's important to document what was resolved, right? So that the issue doesn't present itself again 3 or 4 or 6 months down the road. So document those solutions, managing conflict. So that's a starter piece for building your powerful boards and your very high functioning boards. We did want to spend just a moment here to put out some marketing piece around our next 2 webinars. Amy Barnhart will lead a presentation in March on the board's role in fundraising and some ideas exploring that on a deeper level. And then I'll be back in June on a presentation on how the board can evaluate its own work, its staff, and the organization's progress as well. And so we'll take a moment to address any questions we have from the participants, and with that I'm going to turn it back over to Anna for any final comments.
All right, thank you, Eduardo. And please know we also will make this webinar available for viewing on the New Mexico MainStreet YouTube channel. And of course, if you're gathering a group to watch the webinar and questions come up, please don't hesitate to either write to Eduardo or to Anna directly with any questions for follow-up on the webinar as well, and we'll be happy to respond to those questions. And like I said, or as Eduardo mentioned, look for those upcoming webinars too. We'll be sending out information for you to register as we get closer into the March webinar. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us.